Hello again everyone from Tokyo, Japan, and welcome back to Japan Vintage Camera. I'm coming to you again from Hinokicho Park at Tokyo Midtown, where it's another beautiful spring day and the busiest day I've seen at the park so far this year. It's the last week of May, and the way it looks, everyone will be returning to work and to school next week. We're expecting the state of emergency to be lifted at any time. Yesterday, all of Japan saw only 33 new cases of the coronavirus, and most of the country has seen none at all. The state of emergency was lifted in most of Japan last week and is only in effect in the large metro areas in the country, but these are seeing almost no new cases as well, so we'll certainly be getting back to work next week. So people are trying to get out and enjoy their time outdoors while they can. It's a beautiful day today, but next week June will begin, and June brings on the rainy season, which is quite miserable in Japan on those years where there's a lot of rain. And then following June we have July, where the worst of the heat and humidity tends to hit. So if we're going to enjoy some nice time outdoors here in the springtime, it's going to be this weekend or perhaps next weekend if the weather is nice then. It's been quite a busy week for us. Yesterday we added a new member to our family. His name is Max, and he is a 4-month-old Jack Russell Terrier. We'd been wanting to get a dog for the last several months and have spent a lot of time traveling around the Kanto area visiting breeders and things like that. And eventually we settled on Max, who we happened to find in a pet store here in Tokyo, but he was born near Tokyo at a reputable breeder, so we didn't have any issues with buying him from a pet store. We wanted another Jack Russell Terrier because our 2 previous dogs were Jack Russells. My wife had Jack Russell, which we brought to Japan, and she lived with us for 18.5 years, so quite a long life. And when I was a younger man, I owned a Jack Russell Terrier when I was a student. So we really loved these dogs, and we thought another Jack Russell would be a great choice for our young daughter. So far he's behaving like a gentleman, and we're looking forward to having a lot of fun with him. So we'll go ahead and get started on today's video, and this is about quite an interesting camera, which I tend to say about all the cameras, but even more so in this case. This is the first example of one of these cameras which I've actually held in my hands. This particular camera is a Yashicaflex S, which was introduced in Japan in 1954 or so, and has the distinction of being the first Japanese film camera which came with a built-in light meter. It's called a Yashicaflex S, and S stands for Seaconic, which was the company which manufactured the meter for this particular camera. It looks quite similar to other Yashicaflex cameras, other than the additional accessories required for the meter, and the operation function is the same as most other Yashicaflex cameras. It vaguely resembles the Yashicaflex C. It features the same film winding, focusing, and film counter reset controls as the C. And if you look at the front, it has the same bayonet mount as the C around the lenses, and also the same script around the shutter in red paint, which you would find on the Yashicaflex C. But pretty much that's the only thing which this camera has in common with the C, and pretty much everything else is different. The most obvious difference is the lens. The Yashicaflex C comes with a Yashicore lens, whereas the Yashicaflex S comes with a Heliotar lens, 8cm f3.5 lens. And the script is a little bit different. The Yashicaflex C uses the newer Yashicaflex C, where the Yashicaflex S uses the older script, very similar to the Yashima or Pigeonflex cameras which came before it. And on the top here we have the kind of stylized Y for Yashica and Yashima, rather than the simple red emblem which came on the Yashicaflex C. I'll go ahead and describe the features and functions of the camera, starting at the top. And of course, like all TLRs, we have the standard pop-up lens hood with a focusing loop, which also pops up and allows for close focus. And the Yashicaflex S also features the so-called sports finder, which you activate by pushing the front door down, and you use by lining up the small square in the back with a large square in the front. And to close it, I just gave a brief example a minute ago on how to close it. Just partially close the hood and it will cause the door to pop up. On the right side here we have the film winding lever, which is very much like the Yashicaflex C. You wind the film with this lever and the film counter is here. I just reset the counter on this, so I'm going to wind it up until it gets to the number 1. When it reaches any of the numbers, the winding knob locks, and to progress to the next frame you need to push the button in the center. That unlocks the winding mechanism and allows you to advance to the next frame. When you are loading film in the camera and you need to reset the film counter, it's a 2-step process. You have to push in the button, the frame counter button, and you have to push back on this reset knob on the bottom. And this will reset the film counter to the S setting. Below this we have the focus knob. When you're buying one of these cameras, just like the Yashicaflex C, you have to be careful that the focus rack is not loose and that the lens panel is moving in and out smoothly and evenly. Sometimes when you work these, one end of the panel will come out first and the other will lag behind it. This is caused by one of 2 different things. Either the focusing rack is worn out on the inside, or possibly the screws which hold on the lens panel on the front are loose. It's quite easy to tighten the screws, though you have to lift up the leatherette in order to do that. If the focusing rack is kind of loose, in that case I usually don't mess with these cameras because that's kind of a very difficult and complicated job. So, but yeah, keep an eye open for focusing issues if you're looking for one of these cameras. Looking at the front of the camera, most of the things are the same as you'll find on the Yashicaflex C. We have the same shutter speed selector lever here, and with the same style of shutter cocking lever. And of course over here we have the aperture selector, and on the bottom here we have the self timer. Go to the other side here. This is the indicator for the light meter, which is connected to a selenium cell located in the top front of the camera. There's no way to adjust the film speed on this particular light meter, though there is a way that you can adjust it up or downward to compensate for either the weakening in the cells or possibly to fine-tune the meter so it matches a handheld light meter. The standard film in these days was ISO 50, so I would assume that if you were going to use this camera, you would use the meter as though it was set for programmed for ISO 50. Then you would have to apply a little bit of math in order to use faster film speeds in the camera. To use the light meter is quite simple. If you look at the top of the light meter, you have a series of numbers from 1 to 7. And on the top here you have a simple mechanical computer which also has the numbers 1 through 7. So what you would do is you would take a light meter reading and look at what the light meter needle happens to say and see which number it is lined up at, and then you would pull the slide here so it would match up. So if it said number 4, I would pull this to number 4 and it would give me say a recommended shutter speed of 1/60th of a second and recommended aperture speed of f5.6. So not a difficult light meter to use, more simple than you would find in say a handheld light meter. Though if you are using one of these cameras and you are familiar with how this works, I might use a handheld light meter or a smartphone app. We don't have a flash mount on this camera. In order to use a flash mount with these cameras which do not have a flash chute, you have to use an adapter bracket which attaches to the bottom. And here you have a connection for the flash sync cable. And here you have the knobs which retain the film spools. Loading the film in the Yashicaflex S is exactly the same as loading it in the C and most other Yashicaflex cameras. Push this lever over following what the arrow says and lift up on the tab here and open the film door. Here you see a couple of red arrows. What you would do is you would install your roll of film in the bottom here, pull the film over the film chamber here and thread it into the take-up spool, and keep threading it until the arrows on the paper backing line up with the red arrows on either side of the film chamber. Close the door. make sure it's latched securely. Sometimes the latch here won't quite catch on the little hole in the middle. You have to be careful that it does, otherwise it can pop loose and the film door will open and partially expose your film. Once the film is installed, you simply turn the winding lever until the number 1 shows up in the window and the camera is ready to shoot. Then you would select your aperture. So it recommended f5.6 at 1/60th of a second. That's what the light meter recommended. Charge the shutter, focus, compose, and then shoot. And that's all there is to it. Twin lens reflex camera is really easy to use and it can take really wonderful photographs. So far, when you look at modern cameras, when you compare digital to film, though film is quite antiquated, the resolution of 35mm film is still far higher than what we can get out of any full-frame digital camera on the market today. And when it comes to medium format, it offers worlds more resolution, much more dynamic range. And for me and other film shooters, it still has a character which digital still hasn't been able to catch up with. Maybe in another 10 or 15 years at the current rate, we'll have a digital camera which can more closely mimic the quality of film. But in the meantime, until that happens, we could just continue to shoot film cameras. Anyway, that's my review of the Yashicaflex S twin lens reflex camera. I'll be listing this camera shortly in my Etsy and eBay stores. I'll post links to my stores in the description below the video. If you have any questions about the Yashicaflex S or other vintage Japanese cameras, feel free to leave them in the comments section. If you'd like to see more videos about vintage Japanese cameras, please subscribe. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope you tune in again soon.